Welcome back to FAMCAST. Well, you know, it's hard to top what Dr. Krishnan did in her first segment because passionate, committed, understands preventative health. However, we got the guy for you to be able to do that, right? We are so excited to have back on FAMCAST Dr. Stefano Sinicropi, which I'm going to read his bio, but I got to say, not only has Dr. Sinicropi been on our show, he is making inroads in ways that I just have to commend, doing incredible work throughout the U.S. I'm really proud to say he's one of the first ever FAMBassadors. Yes, you heard it, into the U.S., this Canadian-wide movement recognized by Health Canada now has Dr. Sinicropi as part of this, and we are so honored. So let me introduce you to him. If you haven't listened to the previous podcast with him, you got to go back because he's got a lot to offer. He is energized and making a difference. So, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi is a renowned board-certified orthopedic spine surgeon whose career spans nearly 2 decades and over 9,000 surgeries. Through his surgical experience treating spine issues, he has borne witness to a disturbing general health trend among his patients, an epidemic of chronic disease. This stark reality deeply concerned him, igniting a profound passion to dig deep into the science of wellness, which has taken him down diverse branches of medicine, including Western, Eastern, and alternative approaches. Through various mediums, including mainstream media, social media, videos, conferences, lectures, and podcasts like this, including his own podcast, Wellness at the Speed of Light, and radio show, Recharging the Human Battery, he's on a mission to share his continuously growing learnings to empower, educate, and inspire the public to live healthier and more balanced. And he loves to use my favorite term now, which I'm honored that he does, helping people become the CEO of their health. And in 2023, he founded Hypercharge Performance, Longevity, and Recovery Clinics, which stand at the forefront of delivering comprehensive, personalized healthcare solutions that integrate cutting-edge technology. So all the way from Minnesota, welcome, Dr. Sinicropi.
I'm honored to be on the show with you guys again. And, you know, I mean, I'm super excited about what's happening, what the things that you guys are doing across Canada. And, you know, Canada's near and dear to my heart. Whether or not you become the 51st state, we'll see. You know, there's a lot of talk of that down here. But that being said, I have a lot of family in Toronto, so always love Canada. And I look forward to spending a bunch of time up there as we get this movement, you know, really going. But yeah, thanks for that amazing introduction. I'm excited to be here today and to talk about some of the things we're doing and what we're seeing and how we can really make a difference and an impact in a very broken healthcare system model where people are just going in all these different directions, don't really know what direction to go in. Certainly most people are not the CEOs of their own health, and certainly that's a phrase. And in my upcoming book, I certainly do give you credit, you know, for that, because it's used like crazy in the book, because that's what it's all about. In fact, it's the name of one of the chapters. But you know, I'm just excited to be with you guys and chat anything, you know, health and wellness and obviously bone health and how important that is in the long-term strategy of people's you know, health journey, we'll call it.
We want to dive in right away because we've got Vicki from echolight here who, did you do some training with Dr. Sinicropi?
Actually, one of my team members, I believe it was Amy, wasn't it, Dr. Sinicropi?
I think she can train the team. I wasn't there that day, but, you know, kind of picked up that she did a great job because they were able to kind of pass on the information very, very easily. And our team's really good at doing them. And so she got them going really, really quickly, which is great because they're not the ones that they had, you know, so nurse practitioners and a nurse, they're not ultrasound trained. And so the fact that they can do it and we're getting really nice scans on people and people are really happy with the information they're getting is really a testament. And now we're actually going to bring on, so maybe you'll come down to do our next training because we have somebody that is ultrasound trained now that is part of our regenerative medicine program, and she'll be doing REMS bone scans. And so we'll need some direct training for her, but it'll be a lot easier. She's ultra, so like, oh, this is nothing. So
yeah.
running. Yeah, hit the ground running.
So, Megan and I were really thrilled to be able to introduce you to this technology originally. And, I was really honored to be on your podcast. And we talked about preventative medicine. I mean, you and I talked for hours the first time. But can you dive in right now to, as a surgeon, why is this REMS technology important to you? And from both the lens of a surgeon, as well as this whole preventative wellness, model that you are really championing throughout the U.S. and beyond.
I'll do it in the order. As a surgeon who sees, as a spine surgeon, we need to make sure that when we are performing surgery on patients, that their bones can tolerate, especially if we're putting in instrumentation. And so this is something that I've dealt with bone health since I started in my career here in Minnesota. And the typical thing we would do is get a DEXA scan, make sure they're in the in the normal range to very low osteopenic range. And then we were comfortable going ahead and doing these spinal surgeries. But it's very, very important. And one of the things that really bothered me early in my career is that people were certainly doing operations on some of these folks that are really you can just see, I gotta look at them and say, well, this person has osteoporosis, right? They're very thin, kind of frail. I just saw one yesterday, 100-pound lady. And when we get her score back, it's going to be, she is really, really at risk and also somewhat malnourished and those kinds of things. But anyway, I've been doing this for a long time. So I've been using DEXA scan. So I've been around this aspect. So I've always really tried to help people to build their bones back through exercise and, vitamin D and protein intake, all the usual things that we do as spine surgeons. But I will tell you, as a spine surgeon, before we get into the general wellness picture, I've always been really bothered, and we'll talk about this later a little bit. I've always been really bothered about how many people are being put on these high, let's say, acuity medications that have so many different side effects. And again, I always have to say this, I always have to put a caveat because I am a physician and I don't want people to think that I'm some anti-medication guy that like you can't use medicines. Medicines, when used judiciously, have saved millions of lives. We'll get that off the thing. However, there are studies, and I started research. This is way before you approached me as this, but I knew because I always talk to people what medicines you're on, which infusions are you taking? Are you taking orals? Are you taking injectables? But what always bothered me is one of the things sometimes I couldn't really correlate why some people were on medications and why other people had literally never had a DEXA scan and they're 82 years old and frail and have already had. It's bizarre. So it was very variable the way people were being. So I was, but the number one thing that's bothered me is how many people were being put on medications so early on without investigating other potential options for them, without being put on the proper nutrition, without looking at doing resistance exercise. I mean, how many articles are out there on resistance exercise and what it does for your bone architecture and your bone health? And then how many people weren't even, PEMF technology for bone health? How many articles are out there? If you ask the average physician, I did, because I was asking my colleagues, say PEMF. That's just another word. They don't know. They're like, well, is that another type of a pillow? Is that like the My Pillow guy? He's got a new. They just don't know. So I've always been bothered by this. So it was really a perfect timing, kind of when we met each other and started talking about it. Because when you brought this technology to my attention, as soon as I saw it, I said, wow, this has the potential on both ends. When diving into the real science on both ends of the spectrum. So there's two things. There's all these people that are not even being evaluated because people are not sending them for DEXAs for whatever reason. Maybe it's the radiation, maybe they just don't want to, but it's also not part of a lot of physician practices here in the US. It's a reactive function. Okay. Yep. Or they're going to have surgery. Now we're going to get a scan. It's not like, hey, let's preemptively look at everybody. And we pick up, right? A lot of our population, right? Well over 50 million people have bone health problems in the US. It's a huge problem, but yet patient after patient, the first time they were ever getting a scan was when I was asking them to get a scan because I had to put screws in their back. Yeah. or they were getting a scan when they were coming with 9 compression fractures. And I'm like, well, I can't help you now. You're as brittle as can be. We've got to start over and, figure it out. And then the other end of the spectrum, like I talked about, where people were borderline, right, when they came to their T-score, and yet they're being put on all these big gun drugs. First, that's literally the first step.
Yes.
That's not the first step. And so the beauty about the REMS bone scan is you're helping, obviously, for regular people, they just want their bone. It's great. And it gives us a great option. It's easy to use. It's portable, all those things. I'm sure your other, guests are going to talk about all these things. So I don't have to rehash that. But on the ends, it's amazing because on the one hand, we can bring this technology to so many millions of people to prevent things from ever happening and getting them scanned early. And I can tell you that, when I talk to my patients now and I say, oh, we just ultrasound your hip, I just say, well, and we just put on your back and then you get a printout. They're like, that sounds great. When can I go? Can I go this afternoon and get my REMS bone scan? A lot of people will just literally go over from my spine clinic over to get a REMS bone scan because they're like, wow, that sounds great. That's so easy to do. So that, that's kind of, like the one, but with those patients where they're on the fence, they're on all these big guns. And then recently, now I'm telling them, you know what? I understand you have a T-score. And I understand that our medical, just like we do it with diabetes and all this other stuff, we treat to a score. Yes. That's not a plan. That's just like, oh, here's a score. We'll get you to this score. That's not a plan. What we need to do is really figure out what your bone architecture is, so then we can make a decision. Maybe I need to have a conversation with your endocrinologist and say, hey, we got a REMS bone scan on them. Their bone architecture is not too bad. Do we really need to have them getting these infusions constantly? Do we have to put them at risk for atypical femur fractures and osteonecrosis of the jaw and heart conditions? I can go on forever. And again, I'm not anti-medicine. And some people absolutely need the big gun stuff because I don't want them to come in with the 9 compression fractures. But we've got to really be judicious and we have to have a plan. And and you guys are aware, there are these studies that have come out, larger studies looking at people. And 2 things. One, sometimes there's really, there's not a standard on how we put these people on these medications. But the other thing is, and this is one of my things, now we're going to tie into the overall problem with our medical management. And I have these great slides. I wish I could share them on this thing, but every condition that we're treating, right, is getting worse, right? Obesity's worse. This is worse. And guess what? We are medicating way more than we ever have, but yet every chronic disease is worse. Honestly, the only thing we've gotten right is less people smoke. I'll give our society that. Everything else is in the wrong direction. And equating that, like, for example, how many more people are on diabetic medications, but yet how many more diabetics do we have? That's not working. It's not working, folks. It's not working. So if you look at osteoporosis treatment, right, there are articles out there that clearly show that despite us treating more and more people with medications, the rate of fractures is not going down. It's going up. This is a big problem, and we really need to get a handle on it. And this, like the REMS, just gives us this great tool to be able to have a different way to look at that bony architecture and make decisions a little bit different, because it makes more sense to me to treat to their bony architecture rather than treat to some number that may or not, that's not telling the complete picture. So that's it in a nutshell. And sorry, I go off on these long tangents, and you give me a simple question, and 15 minutes later, here we are.
It's valuable, and I know the girls want to jump in too. The key thing here that you said is that, bone quality, and there's research to support that it's a better predictor of whether someone will fracture. Yet bone health is silent until it's not, often until it's too late, like you said, when they come with many compression fractures. And the cool thing about this, the empowering piece about that, is that bone quality is very sensitive to lifestyle. And that's where this whole preventative mission and empowering the patient, this excites us, doesn't it, Megan? Because we see it every day in our clinics, every single day.
And it's so great to talk to people who are on the same page, right? Because as we talk about swimming upstream, stream all the time. I just love your approach, with the patient at the center as well. It's the same as Dr. Krishnan. But what I wanted to ask you about, and if you don't want to answer this question, that's totally fine. But do you see yourself, I mean, you've used DEXA up to this point. Do you see yourself making adjustments as to who's back you're putting a screw in or not, or with the REMS now in conjunction? Are your patients getting DEXAs and REMS, and you're making a broader decision about how you're going to approach a patient surgery? Does that make sense?
That's a great question. I mean, actually, a great example on that. So now that we have the REMS technology, we have the ability to do it. It really is my pride. Now, if they have a DEXA scan and it's completely normal and they're young and healthy, then I just go with that because they've already had it and somebody's worked them up and they're fine and we haven't had any issues. But interestingly, I had a gentleman who was one of these people at the margins, and I just had a feeling, and it was great because I was going to set him up. The guy had all these surgeries before. He was from the Dakotas, and he came down to see me, and he's like, yeah, I want you to do my surgery. It's a mess. Nobody wants to operate on me. I've had like 9, whatever. But he also had these compression fractures, and he was a middle-aged guy. And because of those, he was quote unquote labeled as having, a bone problem, and his DEXA score was borderline. But I looked at the guy and I was looking at his scans, and I said, I think we'll be fine, but I want to get you in for a REMS bone scan because I want to see what your bony architecture, his fragility. It was great. He was fine. And interestingly enough, when I went and I did his revision surgery, and I put a lot of screws in this guy, I mean, his bone was like granite. It was no trouble at all. But yet the guy comes and he's like, yeah, my doc's like, I don't know if I could do the surgery because your bones are no good and your DEX is, somewhat borderline. So it's an amazing, opportunity. And, and I think that the way I'm using it now, I prefer to just do a REMS. So if they've never had a DEXA, I just do a REMS. I'm not going to do a DEXA because it's not necessary. If they've had a DEXA and it's older, we'll do and it depends if they're on the margins or not and what the situation is. But the biggest thing is I see these patients all the time, again, not to rehash the whole thing, that are on all these things. And I ask them about what lifestyle changes, what have we made? And again, they're seeing me not in the capacity, because I see patients also in the integrative health clinic. That's different. I have an hour with them and we go through everything. We look at their hormones and everything, the whole thing. But when I see them in my spine clinic, they're coming there for a spine surgery consult. But so many of them have issues where they're being treated already for bone health problems. But again, what is not happening is we are not doing any of the lifestyle changes. When I say no, but I'm being honest. Nutrition, I asked them about, what's your nutritional plan? Nothing. What's your supplement plan? Nothing. What's your vitamin D level? Am I supposed to get a vitamin D level? Forget hormones. Like no one has that stuff. I asked them, has anyone talked to you about toxins and your occupation and how that might play into your mitochondrial health and your bone architecture? Nothing. I'm like, so we're starting over and we're going through all the wellness. And then the thing that bugs me the most is these women that clearly have bone health issues, and they're on medications, and I say, okay, what's your resistance exercise program? And they're looking at me like I'm like, who is counseling you? Our system has turned into a sick care model where we're just reactive. People come in, they have an issue. We're like, we'll just write you this script. We'll put you on this infusion. We'll do that. You know why? Because the other stuff takes time. And you really have to get to know the patients and learn everything about them and really get comprehensive lab panels and all this other stuff. And the truth is, our model is not set up conducive to making our population healthier. We're just in this crazy, weird cycle of spiraling, down the toilet. I'm going to use, unhappy terms, where we're just getting, people are getting sicker and sicker. We're doing more and more invasive things on them and medications and things like that. and 80% of this is completely preventable. Completely preventable.
Well, Dr. Sinicropi, I mean, every time we talk, there's never enough time. I know how busy you are, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your crazy schedule. We are coming up to Preventative Health Month, and I can't say how excited I am to have you involved with it. Bone Health Day, a whole day dedicated to it, is February the 20th, which we're pumped about. This, of course, will air, as well as many other things. We're really looking forward to continuing to do work with you, and thanks for championing REMS and preventative health. We're going to be better together, and I'm amazed by what you're doing and the leaps you're making. You know, the fact that you even said PEMF as a surgeon, as somebody in the complementary healthcare space, I do this to you. Thank you. Because welcome to the party, and there is science behind all of this, and we know that. It's just, where's your teaching come from, and we can learn from one another. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's great, to strategize and think about these things with you guys, and hopefully we can continue pushing this, FAM movement down here in the U.S. I think it'll take off like wildfire, and I'm really hoping my colleagues really see the light and move over to using, the echolight REMS bone scan, because it's going to make a huge difference. And the last thing I didn't say, and I want to say, for you young people out there, you really should think about getting a bone health evaluation, especially, women. Even though men, we never got into the whole, the osteopenia and osteoporosis that's growing in men with our sedentary lifestyles, our toxins, hormonal issues, and this and that. But please consider, if you see this podcast, please consider going out and asking to have a REMS bone scan early, because boy, can it make a huge difference for your future self. So thanks for having me on. You guys are amazing, and we have to do another 1 or 2 or 3 hour episode here coming up. There's just so much going on.
Be careful what you offer, because we're going to take it. Always a pleasure, Dr. Sinicropi. Always a pleasure. We'll see you next time. So for all of you at home, stay tuned, because we're coming back with one more episode, or one more segment here on PHAMCAST. See you soon.